Hey, this is Yvonne Wakefield. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'll be discussing my 3 books, but I'll be reading from Babe in the Woods, Building a Life One Log at a Time. The first book about me building a log cabin at 18 that I still own in my 60s. So sit down, relax, get your beverage, hydrate. Last chapter 6, you were introduced to Jim, who is a pivotal person in my life in building the cabin, and he would be still. Oh, actually, he is kind of still in my heart. So, I had just hit my head with the bow saw, found Jim, who's going to help me build, and I'm going up to my property. I'm still downtown after I got stitches in my head, so I stop at the grocery store. So chapter 7, here comes the judge. Before I head back up the mountain, I stop to shop at Chester's Thriftway, John Day's largest and only full-service grocery outlet. I buy a small block of Tillamook cheese, box of Triscuits, 2 cans of tuna, apples, and carrots. Provisions enough to last me a week if I augment my diet with the legumes and rice I'd bought in bulk and stored in the back of the gremlin. My poleaxe and stupid bow saw were great at cutting small branches, but not the fuel required to tend a campfire long enough to boil rice and beans very edible. So I relied on store-bought food within limits. There are fresh tire tracks heading up from the place where I parked in the meadow. I fill my backpack, grab a hatchet, and begin hiking up, purposely not following the tracks because I'm edgy at the thought of who might be behind the wheel of the vehicle making them. When I bought my land the summer before, Robin told me the only other person to go past the Green Meadow Gate was a judge. Some weekends and on long holidays, he stayed in a cabin built in the heart of the sloping meadow I now cut through, retracing the footsteps I left the day before. I stopped to catch my breath, leaned back against a tree, and looked past that cabin and up to the surrounding crowns. They spire like vaulted ceilings in cathedrals where I once knelt to pray, when I still believed being inside a church was the only place where I could feel holy, blessed, or repentant. Now I find sanctuary in the outdoors under branches. When I step back and adjust my pack, I'm startled by an angry metallic, though not with exactitude. I'm familiar with this hum inflicted with pain, a sound I trace back to my brother when I found him kneeling over a mason jar in a sunny lot where blue-bellied lizards slept under boards. In his surfer shirt, he looked like a baby beach boy as he focused a magnifying glass on bees trapped inside the jar. The brighter the light beam, the louder the buzz as bee wings sizzle to fuzz. The louder the buzz, the broader my brother's grin. What reminds me of burning bees in the past is actually the whine of a machine. I know this for fact because there's a smell of gas in the chilled air, and the white blanket mountainside means every bug is snug in a bed of snow. Afraid that isn't made by dormant bees, I make an about face to the safety of my car when a final deep-throttled and then dead silence stops me in my tracks, and I run to look up towards those spiraling pines. Gray smoke puffs out from the tree line. An evergreen in a cluster of many on that knoll shivers, shakes, and sways before taking the slow, steady, final bow I have seen only once before. Snow flies, branches flip, and needles rain down as a tree falls uphill from me. I reflexively step aside, and the weight of my pack pitches me back as I struggle to stand behind a fresh fallen pine. A figure appears, then strides down slope. "Shit, girl!" Where in the goddamn hell did you come from? Asked a man, his towering stature covered by an insulated jeans jacket. On top of his head is the most sweat-stained, fire-hosed ear flap that this mountain ever knew. His face is creased as this butt he's just sliced through, his questions more of a demand, spitting a dark umber stream. He heads my way. I will learn a lot from this man, including not to swallow what he spits out. But I have no way of knowing this now in proximity to a man with manners as unrefined as his dress. A first impression that gets me asking and getting me up on my feet. You lost or just out for a stroll? Asked the codger, now in close view. Sawdust clings to his trim salt and pepper beard. I unstrap the pack, stand, brush snow from my butt, introduce myself, and then explain my reason for unintentionally being in his vicinity. I'm going to build a log cabin up Pine Creek. I point up toward the mountain on my left. The man breaks a stained smile, lolls his tongue around the corners of his mouth. You are you, with that? He nods at the hatchet in my hand. I nod back. Affirmative. I've got a bow saw, too. Bob, the man extends his hand, but call me Judge. Everyone does, because I am a judge. I take his oily work glove in my new leather chopper. What happened to your head? I tell him. He listens, lets out a long when I finish my explanations, then says, how about some coffee? Time for a break. Must be close to noon anyway. He looks at the sun. I look at my watch. It's 11:45. The judge turns, trudges back up the slope. I follow him to a freshly cut fir stump, oozing pitch. Wait a bit. He picks up the chainsaw, yanks it to a roar, then buzzes off boughs from the tree just felled. The saw's piping hot muffler sizzles when he sets it down beside a battered cooler in the snow. The judge gathers up pine boughs, places a layer over the fresh stump, then around the base of the trunk facing the sun. Have a seat. He points to the stumpy cushion of green. Seated on my pine throne, a bough rug underneath, I wait to be served. The judge opens the cooler and pulls out a thermos. Helps keep the coffee warm and my bar oil from getting thick. He closes the lid and sits on the cooler to pour out hot coffee premixed with cremora and sugar into a battered tin mug. I welcome the warmth in my hands, then belly. By the second cup, I learn the judge is a circuit judge, meaning that he tries crimes in adjacent counties. On weekends and holidays, the judge returns to John Day, where he has a plush house in town and a wife who loves the rural country club scene. He spends every hour he can on his 260 acres spread out among majestic ponderosa stands, sage, greasewood, and a side-winding stream too wide to ford in a single stride. Hanius, squedunk, sluice, and blue pine are words I will eventually learn from him. Right now on this stump, I learn there is an old cabin on a chunk of land half a mile below my building site. The judge spits and sips and says, no one's been there in that cabin for years, unless you count critters. You can stay there until you get that log cabin built. He adds with a wink that says, you be driving back to where you came from by morning. Come on, I'll take you there. The judge reminds me of Emery and Jim, a sweetheart wrapped in a seasoned crust, a man who simply wants to help me out, a man who I feel instinctively I can trust. He's one of the few I've ever met, most of them only recently, and they all happened to live around John Day. I hoist my pack into the bed of his four-wheel pickup drive, all four wheels chained. I put the hatchet next to the pack and get inside the cab. And we fishtail along roads that were until now just part of untracked landscape. We got to pack down from here, the judge turns around and then stops the truck on a level above a sloping hillside leading towards a creek bed. He shoulders my pack and I follow him, stopping at what appears to be a bridge built on top of two fallen trees. Let me go first. The judge takes the hatchet from my hand. In one swing, he cuts a thick dead limb and uses it to poke and prod through a mantle of snow covering a log bridge well past its time, as is the cabin on the other side. In the shade of a forested creek bank buffer is an old green stained stockade log cabin. It tilts to the left, then to the right, and buckles midpoint, weighted by abandoned decay. There's an outhouse up there. The judge points to a rickety structure that shares the cabin's architectural merit. Don't know what shape it's in, but a hole's a hole. Best to check for spiders before you can take a The judge clears his throat. Before you sit. The judge sets my pack beside a decrepit door. He kicks the jamb, hits the hinges with his gloved palm, and heaves a shoulder into the peeling wood. Shit! Frozen as a witch's tit in February. He gives me an embarrassed look. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Squeedunk, he says. The nickname will stick longer than the door. The judge heaves away harder this time. The jam creaks, dislodging ice chunks. Shit! He bites his tongue, wipes snow off his hat, and kicks open the door. After you, madame. I walk past his outstretched arm. The temperature plummets the second I cross the threshold. Instinctively, I pull up my parka hood and tilt the thermometer on the zipper toward the only window. It is 14 degrees inside the cabin, almost 20 degrees colder than outside. I squint, adjusting from bright outdoor light to the interior film noir scene without highlights. The cabin has one door, one window, and a population of rodents greater than John Day, the city. Evidence of this bustling community includes approximately 1,064,000 frozen turds dropped on so hard they roll under my feet. Walking around, I am at times the spitting image of that proverbial marbles on the floor prank. Whoops, whoops! Elbows flap to keep me upright over this ball-bearing obstacle course. Show you how to build a fire. The judge crunches his way towards the cast iron stove like this cabin in need of an extreme makeover. He goes outside to gather some split wood from under a board by the window next to the door. I look around. This one room, about 20 by 20 feet, has a buckled and sloping floor, an exposed loft, and a roof that leaks daylight. Every inch inside is dirty and dark and hasn't been occupied in nearly over 20 years, except by pests. The judge packs in a pile of pulpy wood, lays it on the floor, and flips open a long blade pocket knife. He whittles shavings from one solid log. You start by building back here. The judge lays fresh tinder in the rear of the stove box. This here will do the trick. He breaks off a frozen chunk of rough amber-colored pitch from a log and sets it under the tiny strip of shavings. He fishes out a box of matches from his jeans, strikes one on the stovetop, and jabs it into the tinder. First a smolder, followed by a snap, a crackle, and the shavings pop to flame. The stove huffs and puffs, then smoke coils out and upward from every opening, fabricated or not, in that stove. Never before treated to a good oiling, that stove's cast iron top cracks with fissures developing since Dwight and Mamie were the talk of the town. Shit! Open the window, gal. Since I'm the only female present, I interpret this to be me. I face the window and yank a casing sealed shut for longer than I am old. Shit, girl! Get your goddamn blamed... The judge reconsiders his demand. Back into it. He fans smoke with his ear flaps. I struggle to open a window with a 20-year-old grudge, give up, and then open the door instead. The sudden draft doesn't faze the judge or the flapping of his hat. The flame is dead and the cabin is filled with smoke. Open the goddamn door. With his face in the firebox, the judge is not aware I'm beyond the jam, deciding if I should run away from this tobacco-chewing madman. Shit! Hand me that log. Instead of bolting, I do as I'm told. The judge twists another frozen pitch of glob off the log. He places it in the smoldering tinder, piles on more shavings, and blows and flaps his lapels like a cormorant at sunset drying his wet wings, bellowing, "Burn, goddammit, burn!" When the flame grows enough to draw smoke up through a rusty stovepipe and out of the hazy cabin, the judge opens the door. "Warm up the cabin," he says, and as I open up the cabin door, a burly pack rat jumps out. We watch it scurry up the log wall into the exposed rafter over the questionable loft floor. "Least you have company, squeedunk," the judge leaves me with a chunk of pitch. All afternoon, I corral mouse turds with brooms and brushes improvised from freshly cut fir boughs. The door stays open, venting the place. Before dusk, I hike a half-mile up to my camp, then back down with my sleeping bag, pots, and pans. At sunset, I close the cabin door. By then, there is a semblance of order. Pans of snow reduced to water, heat on the stove, and my sleeping bag is spread open on a pad before the finicky flames. This day that began under a motel roof ends under a more questionable roof, but one I hope offers more shelter than a tent in the snow. I unlace my soggy boots, hoping they will dry beneath a stove that is supposed to burn hot, but only a stingy orange glow outlines the cast iron cracks. Rodents run in the loft overhead, knocking stuff loose that I try not to swallow or breathe. I have to pee. Outside, I hear a hoot, a howl, and I cross my legs, afraid to go out in the dark. I do not know if I can make it through this night or the next. There is no one to hold my hand. At least the rats have each other. I write this poem. In this light, I see myself for who I am. I am the wild child of this mountain, no one's daughter. I hide from intrusions and dance in full moonlight, naked and shimmering under white. I follow few rules but those that rule, warm days, nights cool, and star motion, the silico flows. I am the wild child who choreographs trees to winds and swims in creeks beside trout flicker. I am the wild child, fed on earth. I have stalked with deer, set snare for hunting men, and sat the day in hot summer hum, coyote paw, patter. I am the wild child, and the mountain is stern. She has flung me like a young cone to the earth before I was ready to ease from her birth. But she is gentle, her hills roll like breasts, give me shelter in and from myself, a wild child. I have walked alone, had no home, and lived in fear. I have kindled fire where there was cold and learned my name. I am a wild child, flung to earth. I cling to the spiral of my birth. The pencil, it is too cold to write with a pen, falls from my hand, and as I curl into sleep, throughout the night I wake to the scratching of pack rats and the realization that in my first 3 nights in John Day country, I've slept in a tent, a motel, and now this motley cabin. I am more alone than I've ever been, but not as lonely as I've ever been. At least these rats don't have ulterior motives. All right, well, thank you for listening to Chapter 7. Next time we'll get to Chapter 8, where we actually get to meet some other characters. So I hope you have a good weekend, week, whatever. Remember to hydrate with your beverage of choice, and read or check into my YouTube channel and podcast, and we'll see you later. Bye bye.